A loyal friend, a loyal marriage mate. When we describe a friend or a mate as loyal, what are we saying about them? Aren't we saying that they are faithful, that we can trust them? Often we start telling stories about how they helped us when we really needed their help. When someone is loyal to us, we are highly motivated to be loyal to them. Our love for them grows, and our attachment to them becomes stronger. At Psalm 18, verse 25, Jehovah is described this way. Psalm 18:25, let's read it together, our theme scripture. With someone loyal, you act in loyalty. So when we are loyal to Jehovah, he's going to be loyal to us. What does that mean he'll do for us? How is Jehovah's loyalty described in the scriptures? And what is the meaning of the word loyalty? Well, if you tap and hold on your device on that word loyal in the verse and tap on topics, you can go to the glossary and get a definition of loyal love. And what we'll do is we'll just post it to the screen so you can see it as well. Most frequently rendered from the Hebrew word hesed, referring to love motivated by commitment, integrity, loyalty, and deep attachment. It is often used in connection with God's love for humans, but it is also love shown between humans. And then at the end of that definition, there's two verses listed. The first refers to Jehovah as abundant in loyal love, and then the second is at Ruth 3, verse 10. So go ahead and tap on that one. And here, Boaz commended Ruth for her loyal love to Naomi. On our monitor, on the right, we see Ruth working hard for Naomi, gleaning in the fields. And what does Boaz say to her? May Jehovah bless you, my daughter. You have shown your loyal love more in this last instance than in the first instance, by not going after the young men, whether poor or rich. So notice that Boaz said Ruth had shown her attachment to her mother-in-law. So loyalty is more than just an attitude. We can't just say we're loyal. We must demonstrate our loyalty. Nor is loyalty just one act of kindness. It endures. It keeps pursuing what is good and never what is evil. It's like a marriage. A husband and wife are attached to each other, and they actively express their love for each other. How long are they attached? Well, they vow for as long as they both shall live together on earth under God's marital arrangement. So it's an enduring attachment. Likewise with Jehovah. If we stay attached to Jehovah, then he's going to remain attached to us. And that attachment is not like some restrictive collar around our neck that gets pulled. No, Jehovah's attachment is always loving. He has promised to actively pursue what is good toward us. Through thick and thin, we can count on his help. So, loyalty is shown. It's actively expressed. It endures and is always loving, never evil. Who is the best example of loyalty? Of course, it's Jehovah God. Think of how he expressed his loyalty to his son, Jesus. Turn to Ephesians chapter 1 and look at verses 20 and 22 there. Ephesians 1. Now, since Jesus was Jehovah's chief loyal one, he is his chief loyal one, how did Jehovah remain lovingly attached to Jesus, and how was Jesus rewarded for his loyalty? Well, in verse 20 it says Jesus was resurrected and exalted to God's right hand. And then in verse 22, he also subjected all things under his feet and made him head over all things with regard to the congregation. So what a reward for Jesus' loyalty. And by rewarding Jesus in this way, Jehovah set the perfect example of loyalty. Yes, Jehovah highly favors his loyal ones. He values this quality. He requires it of his servants, and he promises to reward it. Psalm 4 verse 3 says, Jehovah will treat his loyal one in a special way. So would you like to be special to Jehovah? Of course we would. Then we need to learn from the examples of loyalty and disloyalty in the Scriptures. So what we'd like to do is take a look at 8 ancient examples in the Bible very briefly. So if you're taking notes or even mentally, you may want to just put a line down there and make 2 columns. Label one loyal and the other disloyal. What's our goal? To sharpen our understanding of this godly quality and then to draw closer in our attachment to Jehovah. So what will a loyal person do and what will they avoid? First, let's look at Jacob and Esau. Please turn to Genesis 26, verse 35. Now, when Esau was 40, he married 2 Hittite women. How did his parents feel about this union? Verse 35. And they were a source of great grief to Isaac and Rebekah. Why was that the case? Well, the religion of the Hittites was pagan, undoubtedly phallic, as were other Canaanite religions. But their beliefs and practices didn't seem to matter to Esau. He was more interested in self-gratification than in his relationship with Jehovah. Look at the last sentence in Genesis 25. Verse 34 says, Esau despised the birthright. What was so special about his rights as firstborn? Esau had the opportunity to be a part of the line leading to the Messiah. But to his shame, he impetuously sold it for 1 meal of lentil stew and some bread that we see on the monitor. And as a result, Hebrews 12 verse 16 describes Esau as not appreciating sacred things. On the other hand, Jacob had a high appreciation for sacred things. Jacob was next in line for the birthright, which he bought in view of his brother's lack of appreciation. Jacob was next in line for the birthright. So at Hebrews chapter 11, Jacob is listed as a man of faith, and he became an ancestor of Jesus Christ. Romans 9:13 says, I loved Jacob, but Esau I hated or loved less. So what qualities or actions on Jacob's part caused Jehovah to remain attached and loyal to Jacob? Well, he had a deep appreciation for sacred things. He took God's promises seriously, the promise of the Messiah. He took his relationship with Jehovah seriously, and it influenced all of his decisions, especially his choice of a marriage mate compared to who his brother Esau chose. So Jacob is a fine example for us to imitate. Our next examples are Moses and Korah. Now in this next picture, near the center left, is Moses with the staff. And then Aaron, his brother, is to his left. He's the high priest of Israel. And on the other side are Korah and 250 men. Korah was disrespectful of Jehovah and his organizational arrangement. He spoke abusively of those taking the lead and sought glory for himself. At Numbers 16, Korah claimed that Moses lifted himself up above the congregation of God. Korah and his supporters were proud, they were rebellious, and they were selfish. And they were trying to grab the priesthood from Aaron. What about Moses, though? Moses deeply respected Jehovah's word and authority. He was humble and patient. How do we know Moses was humble? Let's turn to Exodus chapter 18 and find verse 24 there. A humble person accepts advice. And Moses' father-in-law noticed that from morning till evening the people were coming to him with their problems. And his father-in-law says, why are you doing this by yourself? You're going to wear yourself out. You need to delegate authority to others. So how does Moses respond? Verse 24. Moses immediately listened to his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Moses chose capable men out of all Israel and appointed them heads over the people as chiefs of thousands, chiefs of hundreds, chiefs of 50s, and chiefs of 10s. So they judged the people when cases arose. A difficult case they would bring to Moses, but every minor case they would judge. Yes, Moses was willing to delegate responsibility. So Korah's claim that Moses lifted himself up above the congregation of Jehovah as if he was the only one who could correctly and properly judge the people, that was unfounded. Numbers 12, verses 7 and 8 says, Jehovah spoke face to face by means of an angel with Moses, and that Jehovah entrusted all his house to Moses. So obviously, Moses had a close relationship with Jehovah God, which Korah should have respected. Next, Phineas and Balaam. Balaam collaborated with the kings of Moab and Midian. They asked him to use divination to curse the Israelites. And Balaam accepted payment for this service. On the road to the princes of Moab, we see in our monitor, Jehovah's angel 3 times stood in the road, causing Balaam's ass first to turn into a field, then to squeeze Balaam's foot against a wall, and then at last to just lie down. At Numbers 22, 3 times, Balaam beats his animal, and then his animal miraculously speaks to him. And then finally, Balaam himself sees Jehovah's angel, who announces, "Look, I have come out to offer resistance because your way is in defiance of my will." Now imagine if that happened to you, if an angel suddenly appears in front of your car on your way going somewhere and stops you and says, "Change your direction." Would you change? The end of verse 35 of Numbers 22 says, Balaam continued going with the princes of Balak. How disloyal. Revelation 2:14 says, Balaam taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit sexual immorality, so that a scourge came upon the assembly of Jehovah. So what was the result? Neither Midian nor Balaam escaped divine punishment. As for the Moabites, they were barred from the congregation of God to the 10th generation. The result? Well, let's go on to the next one now. Phineas. Yeah. Let's pick up the account at Numbers chapter 25, verses 6 through 9. See what he did. Numbers 25. Starting in verse 6. But just then there came one of the Israelites bringing near to his brothers a Midianite woman before the eyes of Moses and of all the assembly of the Israelites, while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phineas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he immediately rose up from the midst of the assembly and took a spear in his hand. Then he went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her genital parts. At that, the scourge on the Israelites was halted. Those who died from the scourge amounted to 24,000. Phineas was loyal to Jehovah and zealous for the purity of God's congregation. And how was he rewarded? For standing up for what's right. Jehovah made a covenant with him that the priesthood would remain in his line. Next, David and Saul. Saul was presumptuous. He failed to pay attention. He failed to follow directions. The result? The prophet Samuel told Saul that he was rejected as king by God. Now, in this picture, as Samuel was turning to go, Saul grabbed hold of the hem of Samuel's sleeveless coat, but it ripped away. What about David? Acts 13:22 describes how Jehovah felt toward him. I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man agreeable to my heart, who will do all the things I desire. So what made David agreeable? He was obedient. He displayed implicit trust and confidence in Jehovah. Was David perfect? No, by no means was he perfect. But unlike Saul, who failed to take responsibility for his mistakes, David was humble. He acknowledged his mistakes and was repentant. David had a deep love for Jehovah, and he was willing to do all that Jehovah expected of him. So why are these accounts recorded in the Bible? Romans 15 verse 4 says, "For our instruction." These examples in ancient times teach us how to show loyalty to Christ and the congregation in our day, modern times. Korah was disrespectful of Jehovah's arrangement through Moses. So what is the congregation arrangement for us today, and how can we remain loyal to it? At Ephesians 1, we already read that Jehovah has placed Jesus as the head of the congregation. Therefore, no human is our leader. Our leader is one, the Christ. And how does Jesus feel about the congregation? Well, Ephesians 5:25 says, Christ loved the congregation and gave himself up for it. He's deeply attached to it. And how should that affect us? Well, we should love the congregation in a similar way. There's no greater security than to be part of the Christian congregation. Once we become a part of it and remain loyal to it, we are guaranteed everlasting blessings. So how can we be loyal to Christ and to the congregation today? It's true, we can't see Jesus. Yet there is a way that we can demonstrate our loyalty to him personally. At Matthew 25, Jesus said that we could do good to his brothers, and it would be just like doing good to him. So, who were Christ's spiritual brothers in the first century, and how did he organize and direct them? If we turn to Acts chapter 16, we get the answer. Acts 16. And a little background in verses 1 and 2. It's describing the young man Timothy here, and Paul asked to bring Timothy along with him as he visited congregations. For what purpose? Well, look at verse 4. As they traveled on through the cities, they would deliver to them for observance the decrees that had been decided on by the apostles and the elders who were in Jerusalem. Then indeed the congregations continued to be made firm in the faith and to increase in number day by day. So this really gives us a little idea of how things were organized in the first century and how they corresponded. So if you were to go in the back of your Bible or your tablet to Appendix B, and then B13, the spread of Christianity, you'll see many of the congregations that the Apostle Paul visited, and we posted it on the monitor for us there. And in the center, if you can see some yellow circles near the center of the map, these are cities with congregations mentioned in the Bible book of Revelation. So Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Now, did each of those congregations and more that are listed on that map, did they function independently of each other? No. They all recognized the authority of the Christian governing body at Jerusalem. This governing body was comprised of the apostles and older men in the Jerusalem congregation. So when the governing body made a decision as directed by Holy Spirit, that decision was accepted and became binding on all Christian congregations at that time. How did they find out about those decisions? Well, letters were written and delivered by traveling representatives like the Apostle Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy. By willingly submitting to the direction of the governing body, the congregations continued to be made firm in the faith and to increase in number. So what can we learn from this very brief overview of how things were done in the first century, how things were organized? We learn how to show loyalty to Christ in the congregation today. Out of loyalty, we as Jehovah's Witnesses pattern our congregation arrangements as close as possible to the way things were done in the first century, so that all over 100,000 congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide remain united and firm in the faith. Well, does that make each congregation perfect? No, no congregation is perfect. In the Jerusalem congregation, the governing body, the elders there, were all imperfect. and in our congregations today, in the Minnewaska congregation, the elders and ministerial servants are all imperfect. So where there's imperfection, there's going to be challenges and issues. When problems occur, how can we show loyalty to Christ as head of the congregation today? Well, we can imitate the 4 examples of loyalty that we discussed earlier. Jacob. In column 1, he was a spiritually minded man. So when Christ looks down on us here assembled, does he see spiritually minded individuals? Why, of course he does, because your being here today is evidence that you value and highly esteem spiritual things. What are some of those spiritual things? Well, just think about the Bible. How would Jacob think about the Bible? Well, its laws and principles are the finest and most beneficial precepts for life. What were kings told to do? They were told to read in it day and night. So would Jacob read in it regularly? Of course he would. What about our sacred gatherings? How would Jacob view them? Well, just like you, he wouldn't treat them lightly, and you wouldn't want to be somewhere else instead of here. At the meetings, we receive vital instructions and warm fellowship that we urgently need. And since the Kingdom Hall is where most of our meetings are normally held, Jacob would regularly contribute funds and work hard to keep this place and the grounds properly maintained. What about the sacred work of the congregation? At 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10, Peter described the purpose of the Christian congregation: to declare abroad the excellencies of Jehovah God. Yes, preaching the good news is a sacred work. The Apostle Paul called it a holy work, and we demonstrate our loyalty to Christ by having as full a share as possible in that holy work. What do we learn from Moses? Jehovah loves humble ones like Moses. James 4 verse 6 says, "He gives undeserved kindness to the humble ones." Moses did not promote himself, nor did he become impatient with his brothers. He didn't speak abusively of other servants of Jehovah who also held responsible positions. So what was it that drove Korah to speak against Moses? It seems that he envied Moses and Aaron, and he resented their prominence. So envy and resentment are evidence of disloyalty. They disturb the peace and unity of the congregation. How then can we preserve the peace and unity of the congregation? Well, it starts by thinking the best of one another. We need to avoid imputing wrong motives and questioning the loyalty of our brothers and sisters when they are doing good for us and good for others. One sister thought, well, look at the gift that Sister Generous gave. I wonder what she hopes to get. And she then asked another sister, well, what do you think why did she do that? What do you think? Well, Sister Generous did a good deed. So when someone asks you why you think someone else does a good deed, how are you going to respond? Loyalty to our brothers and sisters will prompt us to praise the good deed and imitate the generous spirit in this case. The motive behind the good deed is really between her and Jehovah. So let's see. Whose business does that make it? It makes it their business and none of our business, right? Okay. Yes, we need to be loyal to the members of our congregation. We need to stay attached to each other with love and smooth out any petty jealousies or personality differences, because if we don't, it could mean our life. We think of what happened to Korah. Loyalty applies to the family as well. If we have siblings, a brother or a sister in our family, how should we treat them? The family arrangement is from Jehovah, and we need to stay attached to each other with love and quickly recognize and avoid any disloyal attitude. Okay, so let's describe some things. To be disloyal in the family is to hurt or to pick at the scab and reopen the wound. Okay, but to be loyal is to love and to bandage and forgive. To be disloyal, to be nosy and prying, to make others squirm. But to be loyal in the family is to respect privacy and to make others feel comfortable. To make things harder? No, to be just helpful with one another. So we should work hard to preserve the unity of our family and never do or say anything to cause pain or hurt each other's feelings. How did Phineas express his loyalty? Numbers 25:13 says, he tolerated no rivalry against his God. So when there is rivalry, there's a question of loyalty. How did Phineas show he tolerated no rivalry? If we turn to Psalm 106 and look at verses 30 and 31, we read what he did. Psalm 106:30. But when Phineas stood up and intervened, the scourge was halted, and it was counted to him as righteousness through all generations forever. So if our loyalty is challenged, what may we need to do? At school, will we follow Phineas' example and stand up for what is right? Well, our actions express our loyalty to Christ and what the congregation stands for. There's also times to intervene. At Proverbs 27, verse 6, it says, the wounds inflicted by a friend are faithful. So you may need to tell a wrongdoer to confess to the elders. But better yet, when you see evidence of a disloyal attitude beginning, the loving thing to do is to tactfully mention it before something more serious happens. For example, Sean, did you see the way Tanya just looked at you? Yeah. Well, you know she's not a witness, and you know what she wants. I see what you mean. Strictly business. So we need to keep up our guard, always. And our loyalty to Christ in the congregation means we will be on the lookout for the welfare of our brothers and sisters related to us in the faith. And we don't have to wound. We just have to be there for them. We just have to remind each other, strengthen each other, to keep on doing what is right. So we hope you've benefited from this talk, and we hope these scriptural examples have strengthened your determination to stay emotionally attached to Jehovah through thick and thin, no matter how long this system lasts. And even if a prominent member of the congregation seriously sins against Jehovah, remain attached to Christ as head of the congregation. Be like Phineas. Be determined to tolerate no rivalry against our God. Be determined to courageously stand up and intervene if necessary, confident that it will be counted to you as righteousness. Be like Jacob. Keep a high appreciation for sacred things, and let your appreciation influence all your decisions, especially your decision to choose a marriage mate. Be like Moses. Respect those taking the lead in the congregation, and cherish your place in the congregation, whatever that may be. Be willing to humbly minister to your brothers and sisters and actively pursue what is good and never what is evil, what is hurtful. And be like David. Humbly admit your mistakes and be willing to do all that Jehovah asks by having a full share in preaching the good news of the kingdom. What are the rewards for proving loyal to Christ's headship? Well, among the many blessings is unity in the congregation. And unity promotes peace and good order. Loyalty to Christ's leadership creates a pleasant, family-like atmosphere in the congregation. That's the atmosphere that we're feeling here in the Minnewaska congregation. Never forget how attached Jesus is to the Christian congregation. He gave his life for it. And as its head, he's directing its operations, using his spiritual brothers, the governing body, to nourish and protect us and encourage us. Under that direction, There is no greater security than to be part of the Christian congregation. Once we become a part of it and remain loyal to it, we are guaranteed everlasting blessings.